The Galactic Council chamber was filled with murmurs. Representatives from dozens of species sat in their floating seats, their holographic displays flashing urgent warnings. A report had arrived, one that should have been impossible. Councillor Drex of the Zoreth Dominion, a towering reptilian being, slammed his clawed hand against the metal table. This is nonsense. Humans have been gone for centuries. Their world was abandoned. Their fleets were destroyed. How can they be back? Across from him, Councillor Yara, a pale-skinned representative from the Kelvani Alliance, frowned. And yet, our deep space probes tell a different story. She flicked her wrist, and a massive display formed in the center of the room. It showed images of massive warships, black, angular, terrifying in their design. The insignia on them was unmistakable. The Terran banner. A hush fell over the room. No one had seen that symbol in over 1,000 years. It had only existed in stories, in nightmares whispered among the younger races. Supreme Chancellor Virik, an elder of the Selthari Imperium, leaned forward in his seat, his 8 golden eyes narrowing. Legends, ghost stories. Humans were wiped out before they could ever become a true power. His voice tricked with arrogance. These ships are likely the work of scavengers using outdated designs. Councillor Yara shook her head. We thought the same at first. But these ships, they are new. Their technology surpasses anything we have ever seen. She zoomed in on an image showing the sleek, armored hull of one of the mysterious vessels. And then there is this. A distorted transmission played. A deep, human voice spoke through the static. You should have left us forgotten. The councillors shifted uncomfortably. The tone in that voice was not a warning. It was a statement of fact. Drex growled, his sharp teeth bared. This could be a trick. Some upstart species trying to use human myths to scare us. Yara didn't look convinced. Then explain this. Another image flickered onto the display. A planet, its surface littered with ruins, untouched for centuries. Once it had been an alien colony. Now the ruins looked fresh, as if something, or someone, had begun clearing the land. Drex stared at it. Who took the colony? Yara's voice was cold. We don't know. But every fleet we send to investigate disappears. A silence settled over the chamber. Then, a low chuckle broke through. It came from Warlord Raxer of the Thrall Dominion, a war-hardened general whose people had once fought against the humans in the distant past. His mandibles clicked as he grinned. I remember the Terrans, he said. They were fierce, strong, but they were not invincible. He turned to the council. If this is truly their return, then we must crush them before they become a threat again. Many in the chamber nodded. The Galactic Council had ruled the stars unchallenged for centuries. They would not let an extinct race change that. But Supreme Chancellor Virik remained calm. He tapped his long, metallic fingers against the armrest of his throne-like seat. We must confirm the truth before we act. If this is an enemy using deception, we must uncover it. If it truly is humanity, then we must show them their place. The decision was made. A fleet would be sent to the unknown region of space. A warning would be delivered. If these ships were Terran, they would have one chance to surrender and join the Council, or be eliminated. None of them realized they had just sealed their fate. Far away, beyond the reach of the Council's eyes, an ancient world flickered with light. Massive shipyards hummed with energy, and towering dreadnoughts floated in formation, their armor gleaming under the glow of distant stars. In the darkness, Earth had never been dead. It had been waiting. And now, it was ready. The galactic fleet made its way into the unknown region of space. Its massive ships cut through the stars, their engines humming with a steady, predictable rhythm. The Council's orders were clear. Find the Terran threat and eliminate it before it could pose any danger to their unchallenged rule. Among the fleet was Admiral Voss, a seasoned veteran of countless campaigns. He had seen it all: the ruthless Zoreth warlords, the cunning Kelvani spies, and the deadly Thrall ambushes. But this mission was different. The Terrans, or what was left of them, had been legends, stories told in whispers, never meant to be taken seriously. Yet, here they were out there in the cold depths of space. "Admiral, we are approaching the coordinates," a young officer reported, his voice filled with a mix of excitement and fear. "Sensors are picking up something strange. We cannot get a clear reading. It's like they're cloaked." Admiral Voss narrowed his eyes. He was no stranger to strange readings. The unknown was part of his job. But this was different. The intensity of the signal was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. "Increase our scanning power. Full sweep. If they're hiding, we will find them." The officer complied, and the ship's systems roared to life. For a moment, the only sound in the command center was the soft hum of the ship's technology working overtime. But nothing prepared them for what they would see next. "There!" the officer shouted, pointing to a massive shape that suddenly appeared on their screens. It was enormous, larger than any ship the Council had ever seen. It was black, sleek, and terrifying. "What is that?" Voss muttered under his breath. It couldn't be. It couldn't be human. The officer tapped furiously at his console, trying to get a better image. "Admiral, that's no scavenger ship. It's a Terran vessel from the old days. The size, it's beyond anything we've seen." Voss's heart skipped a beat. 1,000 memories flooded his mind. Old, fragmented stories told by those who had survived the Terran Wars. Humans, brutal and unstoppable, had once been the galaxy's greatest threat, but they had been wiped out, their fleets scattered to the winds. How could this be possible? Then, another ship appeared beside the first, and another. Before long, the space around them was filled with ships, dark, imposing, and silent. These were no ordinary vessels. The Terrans had returned, and they had brought with them an armada. "Impossible," Voss breathed. "It's a fleet, and it's alive." He stood up, his heart racing. "Prepare for battle. We are not here to make peace. Open communications with the Council." The officer hesitated. "Admiral, should we send a message first? Try to communicate with them before." "No," Voss cut him off. "The Council has already decided. They wanted a message, and we will send it. But we will send it with force." He turned to the tactical officer. "Fire a warning shot. Show them we are serious." The officer didn't hesitate. With a flick of a switch, the ship's massive guns roared to life. A brilliant flash of light illuminated the dark void as the projectile shot out toward the Terran fleet. But before it could even reach the first ship, something impossible happened. The Terran ship closest to the blast opened fire. The entire fleet, synchronized, unleashed a storm of laser fire and missiles. The attack was swift and precise, like a beast snapping into action after years of slumber. Voss didn't have time to react. The blast from the Terran ships hit his own fleet with overwhelming power, instantly disabling several of their ships. It was over in seconds. Admiral Voss stood frozen, unable to comprehend what had just happened. His own fleet, once considered an unstoppable force, had been crushed by the return of an ancient enemy. But this wasn't just a force from the past. These ships, the humans, had adapted, evolved. They were no longer the primitive race the galaxy had once mocked. They had become something far worse. Voss's comms officer spoke up, trembling. "Admiral, they are hailing us." The transmission flickered on the screen. A human face appeared. It was a woman, young but fierce, her eyes glowing with a fire that made even the most hardened of the counselors shudder. She looked straight at the camera, her voice calm yet filled with an icy fury. "You have made a grave mistake." The words hung in the air like a cold wind, chilling the entire room. Voss knew right then that this was no longer a war over territory or resources. This was a war of survival, and Earth had just announced that it had returned to claim its place among the stars. The bridge of Admiral Voss's flagship was eerily silent. The air felt heavy as the human commander stared back at them through the flickering holo-display. Her uniform was unfamiliar, sleek and dark with a symbol that no one recognized, an insignia of a Terran force that should not exist. But it did. The fleet outside was proof enough. "You have made a grave mistake," she had said. Her voice still echoed in Voss's mind as he forced himself to speak. "I am Admiral Voss of the Galactic Council's 7th Fleet. Identify yourself." The human woman did not blink. "You do not recognize us, after all your people have done. How convenient." Voss frowned. "We were sent here under orders from the Galactic Council. You are an unknown military force operating in restricted space. State your purpose." A small, humorless smile touched the woman's lips. "We are the Terran Dominion, Admiral. The last survivors of a species your council tried to erase, and we are here to settle an old debt." Voss's stomach twisted. This was impossible. The Terrans were nothing more than a forgotten legend, ghosts of a war fought long ago. Yet here they were, staring him down with vengeance burning in their eyes. He kept his face neutral. "The Council destroyed the human homeworld centuries ago. No trace of your civilization remained. This fleet should not exist." The woman's expression hardened. "You should have made sure of that." Silence stretched between them. Voss knew that words would not change anything. The Terran fleet outside was proof that humanity had not only survived but thrived. And now they had returned with warships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. His mind raced. The Council had always mocked the Terrans, called them barbarians, primitive, a species of brutes with no place in the stars. If they had known that humans were still alive, they would have hunted them down before they could ever rebuild. And yet, somehow, the Terrans had rebuilt. In silence, in secret, and they had come back with vengeance in their hearts. Voss took a breath. There was still a chance to de-escalate. Maybe. "I do not seek unnecessary conflict," he said. "This is an opportunity for diplomacy." The human woman chuckled, but there was no amusement in it. "Diplomacy? Now you speak of peace." She leaned forward, her expression turning cold. "Where was your diplomacy when the Council bombed our worlds into ash? When our colonies were left to burn?" Voss had no answer. He had not been there. The extermination of humanity had been a decision made long before his time, a war that the Galactic Council had declared as necessary for the stability of the galaxy. He swallowed. That was a different time. The woman's eyes darkened. "Yes, and this is our time." A deep hum suddenly filled the bridge. The officers scrambled at their consoles as red warning lights flared across the screens. "Admiral," one of the officers shouted, "the Terran fleet is charging their weapons." Voss turned back to the screen. "If you fire on us, you will be declaring war against the entire Galactic Council." The human woman's face remained impassive. "Then war it is." Before Voss could respond, the screen went black. Then the Terrans opened fire. The Galactic Fleet never stood a chance. Admiral Voss barely had time to react. The moment the Terran fleet opened fire, space itself seemed to erupt with light. Bright, concentrated energy lances tore through the void, moving faster than any weapon Voss had ever seen. The first salvo struck the 7th Fleet's outermost ships, and in an instant 6 galactic warships were gone, reduced to burning debris. Panic spread through the bridge like wildfire. Officers shouted over each other, trying to make sense of what was happening. "Shields are failing," one officer cried. "Their weapons air." A second barrage hit. Another row of Galactic Council warships vanished in fire. Voss gripped the railing, forcing himself to think. How had the Terrans built such powerful weapons? "Return fire," he barked. "All batteries, target their lead ships. We outnumber them 5-1. The galactic warships fired back. Streams of plasma and kinetic rounds hurtled toward the Terran vessels, but something was wrong. Instead of impacting shields, the enemy ships moved, too fast. Their massive battleships, despite their size, dodged with unnatural precision, avoiding the bulk of the incoming fire. What in the stars? Voss muttered under his breath. This wasn't normal. No fleet should be able to outmaneuver the Council's forces this easily. The Terrans weren't just powerful. They were beyond anything the Galactic Council had prepared for. Then the enemy returned fire once more. A brilliant spear of energy lanced through the Council's command ship. The massive battlecruiser, nearly a kilometer long, split apart like wet paper, its wreckage tumbling through space. The bridge of Voss's own ship shook violently, the force of nearby explosions rattling every console. The lights flickered, alarms blaring. "We're losing ships too fast," an officer yelled. Voss clenched his jaw. He had to think. This was no longer a battle. It was a massacre. The Seventh Fleet had always been considered a formidable force, designed to enforce Galactic Council dominance across the stars. Yet here they were, being torn apart like helpless prey. The enemy had better weapons, better defenses, better ships. But there had to be a weakness. "Order all ships to reposition," Voss shouted. "We need to spread out." Their weapons seemed designed for rapid destruction, but they can't hit everything at once. His fleet responded immediately. The Council warships broke formation, scattering in different directions, hoping to make it harder for the Terran fleet to pick them off. For a moment, it seemed to work. The incoming fire lessened as the enemy ships adjusted to the more erratic movements. Voss exhaled. A small advantage, but still an advantage. "Send a distress signal to High Command," he ordered. "Tell them, we have engaged an unknown Terran force, and we are badly outmatched." The communications officer's fingers flew across the console. "Signal sent, Admiral, but the enemy is trying to jam us." Voss gritted his teeth. Of course they were. Then the main screen flickered. The Terran commander was back. Her face remained cold, unreadable. Behind her, the dimly lit command center of her ship pulsed with silent efficiency. "You fight well, Admiral," she said, "but you are wasting lives." Voss's fists clenched. "You attacked first. We had no choice but to defend ourselves." A flicker of something passed through her eyes. Disgust? Pity? "Do not speak of defense," she said quietly. "The Galactic Council never defended. It only conquered. You murdered our people. You hunted us across the stars. And now, you are shocked that we survived." Voss took a slow breath. There was no reasoning with her. The Council's history with humanity was bloody. Long ago, the Terrans had been a rising force, a young but ambitious race. The Council, fearing their rapid growth, had declared them a threat. A war followed, the war that had supposedly ended humanity. But that war had clearly not destroyed them. It had only made them stronger. "This is your final warning," the human commander said. "Surrender your fleet. Leave this system, and tell your leaders." She leaned forward, her gaze burning through the screen. "We are back." Voss exhaled sharply. He glanced around the bridge. His officers looked terrified. His fleet was in ruins. But he was an admiral of the Council. He had a duty. He turned back to the screen. "And if we refuse?" The woman's expression didn't change. "Then you will be the first of many to fall." Before Voss could answer, a new warning blared across the bridge. "Admiral," a lieutenant shouted, "one of their ships is charging something massive. We're detecting an energy buildup unlike anything we've ever seen." On the screen, behind the human commander, something huge began to glow. A massive, towering warship, twice the size of any galactic dreadnought, began shifting into position. Its sleek, dark hull pulsed with unfamiliar energy, its forward section splitting apart to reveal something deep inside. A weapon. A planet killer, perhaps. Voss's blood ran cold. "Admiral, it's locking onto us." The human commander tilted her head slightly, watching him, waiting for his next move, for his final decision. Voss had seconds to act. The entire bridge held its breath. Then, a single word could decide the fate of his fleet. Would he surrender or fight to the bitter end? Admiral Voss stared at the screen, his heart pounding. The colossal Terran warship before him was like nothing he had ever seen. It dwarfed even the largest galactic dreadnoughts, its dark hull pulsing with an eerie glow. The energy readings were off the charts. A weapon of terrifying magnitude was about to fire. He had seconds to act. "Sir, the enemy ship is charging its main weapon," a lieutenant shouted. Voss knew what that meant. If the humans fired, his fleet wouldn't just lose. They would be wiped from existence. He clenched his fists. This wasn't how the battle was supposed to go. The Galactic Council had always believed humanity was extinct. The war centuries ago had seen to that, or so they thought. Now, the truth was clear. Humanity had survived, and they had returned stronger than ever. Voss exhaled, forcing himself to think. There had to be a way out of this. "All remaining ships, divert full power to evasive maneuvers," he commanded. His officers hesitated for a fraction of a second. They wanted to fight. They wanted revenge. But they also knew the truth. This battle was lost. The fleet scrambled to react, engines flaring as warships began breaking formation, trying to scatter before the Terran superweapon unleashed its fury. The human commander on screen observed them with cold detachment. "You run," she said, "but there is nowhere to hide." Voss's jaw tightened. The Council had always dismissed humans as reckless, emotional creatures, easy to manipulate. But now, looking into the unwavering eyes of this Terran commander, he saw something else: purpose. These were not the same humans the Council had crushed centuries ago. These were survivors, forged in war and exile. And they were done hiding. "Charge all remaining weapons," Voss barked. "If we go down, we take them with us." His bridge crew hesitated. "Sir, do it." The remaining galactic warships turned back, engines burning hot as they prepared for one final strike. A desperate, reckless last stand. The human commander sighed, almost as if she had expected this. "Foolish," she muttered. "Very well." The massive Terran warship fired. A beam of energy unlike anything seen before erupted from its core. The sheer brightness of it blinded Voss for a moment. Then, his fleet started to vanish. Ship after ship was erased from existence, their shields and hulls offering no protection against the unstoppable force. Voss's own battlecruiser shook violently as the energy wave approached. Alarms blared. Fire burst from shattered consoles. Officers screamed, "Admiral, we're losing." Then, in an instant, darkness. The Seventh Fleet, once the pride of the Galactic Council, was gone. The bridge was silent. Voss blinked, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His ship was still intact, but only barely. The main weapon had grazed them, crippling everything but life support. Smoke filled the air. Bodies lay scattered across the bridge, some moving weakly, others not at all. The screen flickered back to life. The human commander stared at him. "You were warned," she said. This was mercy. Mercy? Voss wanted to scream. This was annihilation. But before he could speak, a new transmission came through. A voice from Galactic High Command. "Admiral Voss, report immediately." He swallowed hard. How could he explain this? How could he tell them that humanity, the species they had tried to wipe out, had returned, and they were stronger than ever? And worse, this was just the beginning. Admiral Voss stood in silence, his face pale as the transmission from Galactic High Command flickered on the damaged screen. The Supreme Chancellor's stern face appeared, his golden ceremonial robes a sharp contrast to the chaos around Voss. "Admiral," the Chancellor's voice was cold. "What happened?" Voss swallowed hard. His fleet, the mighty Seventh Fleet, was gone. Destroyed in seconds by a single Terran warship. How could he even begin to explain? "My lord, the humans," he rasped. "They. Impossible." A counselor's voice cut through. "Humanity was exterminated centuries ago." Voss clenched his fists. That was the mistake. "They survived," he said grimly. "And now, they are stronger than we ever imagined." The council chamber erupted in chaos. Multiple voices shouted at once, some in denial, others in fear. The chancellor raised a hand, silencing the room. His eyes burned with rage. "Admiral Voss, do you mean to tell me that an entire galactic fleet, one of our finest, was wiped out by a species that should not exist?" Voss hesitated, then nodded. The room fell into a stunned silence. Then, a new voice cut in. Cold, unforgiving, calculating. "If this is true," said General Tovin, Supreme Commander of the Empire's military, "then we must prepare for total war." Voss felt his blood run cold. War? Did they not understand? This was not a species that could be crushed like before. Humanity had returned from exile, and now possessed weapons beyond anything in the Council's arsenal. "No," Voss said quickly. "We must seek diplomacy. If we antagonize them further, they will." Diplomacy. The Chancellor's voice was a whisper, but it carried deadly weight. "We do not negotiate with ghosts, Admiral." Voss opened his mouth to argue, but before he could, another alert flashed across his screen. His blood went ice cold. "Incoming ships detected." A surviving officer gasped. The entire room froze. "What ships?" General Tovin demanded. The officer's fingers trembled over his console. "They are unidentified. But there are thousands of them." A deep horror settled over the council chamber. Voss turned back to his screen. His heart pounded. They had assumed the Terran fleet was a myth, a legend. But now, the sky was darkening. One by one, massive human warships emerged from hyperspace. Their black hulls blotted out the stars, their weapons glowing with an ominous red hue. The Terran fleet had arrived, and they were not here to talk. The Galactic Council had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity. Now, as their fleets loomed over the galaxy, they realized too late that the species they had thought long dead was very much alive, and far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Admiral Voss stood on the bridge of the Empire's flagship, staring at the fleet of human warships that had appeared out of nowhere. The stars in the distance were almost completely obscured by the massive blackened hulls of the ships. Their sleek designs were unlike anything the Council had ever seen. These were not just ships. They were weapons. Weapons designed not for defense, but for domination. He could feel the weight of the silence in the room. The other officers on the bridge were as terrified as he was. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. The Supreme Chancellor's voice crackled through the communication link. His tone was clipped, almost frantic. "Admiral Voss, do you have any idea what this is? Why they are here?" Voss swallowed hard. His mind raced. Why were they here? Had they come for revenge? Or had the Council's actions triggered something much bigger? "The Terrans are not here to negotiate," he said, his voice hoarse. "They're here to end us." The Chancellor's voice went quiet for a moment. Then he spoke again, but now there was a sharp edge of desperation in his tone. "You need to stop them. Now." Voss hesitated. The idea of facing down humanity's might was unthinkable, but he had no choice. He was the one in charge now, and the weight of responsibility rested on his shoulders. His fleet was already in tatters. He had no idea how to stand against this new threat. "Tell the fleet to prepare for battle," Voss said, gritting his teeth. "It may be our last." The order was given, but as the first shots of the conflict began to fly, Voss couldn't shake the thought. They had no chance. The Terran ships were unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered. The first salvo from the enemy sent waves of energy blasts tearing through the space between them. The Empire's ships, powerful, advanced, were no match for the sheer force and precision of the human weapons. In an instant, the Empire's flagship, the Imperial Thunder, was struck by a beam of blue energy. The shields held for a moment, but the ship began to shudder violently. Then, with a deafening crack, the hull split open, and the flagship began to disintegrate into nothing but space debris. On the ground, across the galaxy, panic began to spread. The news of the fall of the Imperial fleet had reached every corner of the galaxy. The Council was in disarray. Ships were being destroyed. Cities were being burned to the ground. All attempts at communication with the Terran fleet had been met with silence. They did not respond. They did not negotiate. They did not retreat. The human warships moved like shadows, their speed and agility rendering every countermeasure useless. One by one, the Empire's ships fell, leaving nothing but ashes in their wake. The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath as the humans methodically destroyed everything the Empire had built. Admiral Voss, watching from the ruined bridge of his command ship, couldn't believe what was happening. The Terran fleet was unstoppable. And then, in the midst of the chaos, a new transmission came through. The screen blinked to life, and the image of a human officer appeared on the screen. His expression was calm, yet his eyes burned with unforgiving intent. "Admiral Voss," the human said, his voice cold and clear. "This is your last warning. Leave the galaxy or face total annihilation." Voss felt a chill down his spine. The message was simple, and it was clear. The humans weren't interested in surrender. They weren't interested in negotiation. "Why are you doing this?" Voss asked, his voice trembling. "What do you want from us?" The human officer's gaze sharpened. "What we want is simple. You started this. You killed our people. And now we are going to finish this war." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Voss alone in the silence of the ruined bridge. The Terran fleet had made their message clear. There was no mercy. There was no second chance. As the last of the Empire's forces crumbled, the Terran ships began to descend upon the Council's capital. The stars themselves seemed to tremble under the weight of humanity's wrath. The once mighty galactic empire, rulers of thousands of systems, had been reduced to nothing. The galaxy would never be the same again. Humanity had returned. And now, they were not just a legend. They were the rulers. The cost of arrogance had been too high for the Empire, and the galaxy would soon learn that humanity was not a force to be trifled with.